In an interview to the Press Trust of India, Home Minister Amit Shah said the government is working to remove trust deficit between Meitei and Kuki communities to bring peace in the state of Manipur. Amit Shah said that the process will be expedited once the Lok Sabha elections are over. He said that it is not an issue of terrorism, but ethnic violence, hence cannot be resolved through force. The Home Minister also said that due to the lack of discussions and lack of trust between the two ethnic communities, which happened due to some incidents, he added that we will have to repair it and this will be a time-consuming job. This interview was given to Press Trust of India, and my question is, why does one need to wait for Lok Sabha elections to get over to get inside this issue? On this, I am joined by Suhas Chakma, Director, Rights and Risk Analysis Group. My colleague, Brijesh Pandey, Input Editor. But I'll go to Mr. Chakma first. Mr. Chakma, this was an interview. There are other details. We all know the basic facts. How many people died? Where did it happen? What happened in context of the demand for the ST status, the subsequent, the guns being looted, markets being non-functional because of extortion that is being forced down the throat of the common people by the miscreants. My question is simple. It has been more than a year. Everyone acknowledges it. These are the still pictures recapturing what happened in 2023. So the people understand the intensity of it. Manipur has been stable of late. Big incidents have not happened. Law and order is okay. But yes, people have taken positions in the hill, in the valley. That is a disturbing thing. But more or less, administration has brought down situation to control. But when Home Minister says that after Lok Sabha election, the matter will be expedited immediately. When he said, and let me play out that graphic again. My question is, this happened in 2023. I mean to say, all things could have happened right after the month of May, Mr. Chakma.
Well, I think it's extremely unfortunate that the Home Minister of the country, after a year, says we will start the process after the Lok Sabha elections are over. So people would tend to ask, or dare to ask, what have they been waiting for?
Mr. Chakma, he says that the process is on. He said expedited, after Lok Sabha, with the fresh force. My point is limited. I mean to say, it happened in May 2023. The whole year was there to use the full force of negotiation.
So that's what I'm saying. So people will ask, why are you waiting for the elections to be over and then take the measures? What happens if they do not come to power? I mean, at the end of the day, it's an election. Nobody can guarantee who will come to power and who will not come to power. But in the entire process, the last 1 year, basically people have suffered. We need not retreat how people have suffered, because state, basically was a mute witness to the entire process, which they call it now ethnic conflicts. And in a way, it also cast aspersions on the Chief Minister Biren Singh, who has been blaming the insurgents as well as the international groups from Myanmar, etc. Now, if the Home Minister of the country says that, it's an ethnic conflict, it's an issue of terrorism, so, all the drugs, terrorism, everything goes away. So it basically shows that, they did not want to act on Manipur till the elections were over. So it has been put in the back burner, and they wanted the situation develop on its own. And today, if the incidents of violence are not taking place, it's not because the state has taken any effective measures. It's because I think people have got tired of it. There is pressure from the civilians, from both sides, because people are tired of violence. They want to start start afresh. So that's why the situation have come under control, not because of any effective, law and order measures being taken by the government. But I would say, I think, had he made this statement prior to the election,
it has normalized on its own because of the fatigue which is being felt at the basic level.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is what they have been trying to do. And, from the beginning, I think if you have listened to the statement of some of the people who are in the government that, the Naga-Kuki conflict in 92, 93, started, it took years. So basically, when a riot starts in the Northeast, you wait for, people to get, fatigue or people get tired of killing each other. Then, they ultimately realize that we can't kill enough people or we have done enough and therefore we need to get away from this violence. So this is where I think the key issues. I mean, if it is part of India, if we have the fourth largest army in the world, I mean, there is no way you can stop this kind of violence. At the end of the day, you do not use violence only against terrorists. You use violence against anybody who disturbs law and order and who takes away the lives of other people. So if there is a riot in Delhi or if there is a riot in Bangalore or elsewhere, are you going to say that since the terrorists are not involved, we are not going to use the force? If there is a conflict between the different religious groups, are you going to wait for for the riots to end on their own, and because the state will not, act or will not use force? I don't think that's the correct approach. I think the Home Minister, if he had made this statement prior to the elections in Manipur, I think people would have reacted in a different way.
No, what's your take, Brijesh?
Well, I think, if I read the statement of Home Minister, I think it's a welcome departure from all kind of, strong statement which we have been hearing for the last several months, almost a year. The departure is saying that, that we are not dealing with terrorists, but we are dealing with ethnic violence between two ethnic communities, and dialogue is the way forward, is a much, much more sober and a realistic take of the situation which is unfolding in the state of Manipur than what we have been given to understand, that that it is the cross-border terrorism which is fueling this fight, and how it's a narco-terrorism, by depicting one community in complete absolute black as if they are the only one who is doing this gig, and how it is one side to be blamed against another side. I think it's a much more sober and a realistic understanding of a situation where you're talking of both communities as being part of India and not trying to paint one community with tarring one community or one community's image. I think it's a welcome move, but still it raises several questions. The most important being is that why did centre had to wait for 1 year to make this kind of conciliatory statement? And if the centre is making
what's your assessment? Why did they do it? Let's talk
I
about
think,
assessment today.
I think, Karthikeya, I think that they were taken in by what the Chief Minister briefed them, and they bought the entire narration by Chief Minister hook, line and sinker, and or there may be other forces or the other things at play of which we are not privy to. Barring that scenario, the situation which was unfolding was very clear to everyone that why this situation is unfolding, and how with a degree of tact and degree of firmness this situation could have been dealt with. You talk of one particular community, and the poppy cultivators and so on and so forth. Other side, you have a social group within quotes which is holding everybody to ransom. So I'm just saying that the crackdown is not proper. Crackdown is not across board, saying that what is sauce for the goose is also sauce for the gander. Like if I'm breaking the law, I'm being treated with kid gloves. You are breaking the law, you are being treated very, very harshly. So the disproportionate of response. I'm very happy to read that one line that that it is a trust between lack of trust between two ethnicity, and also the fact that that post Lok Sabha election we would want to do it. But I think
in fact I agree. In fact, Mr. Chakma, the words used by Amit Shah are pretty moderate. They are pretty moderate if you compare them with the language used by many in Manipur, including Chief Minister of Manipur. His language has been stronger.
See, the Home Minister doesn't have any option except being neutral and soft. If the Home Minister takes sides at this point of time, given the fact that Manipur Chief Minister is already identified to be someone who is taking sides, then whatever the trust is there. So the Home Minister had to sound reconciliatory. I mean, the only question, I agree with what Brajesh had said, the only question is, this statement or this initiative should have been taken long time before, and there is no reason why this kind of measures could not have been taken in May 2023 itself. There was no reason to let these riots continue for such a long period of time. And, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, of course, at certain point of time, you will have to take measures because the situation have come down. There are no riots. But I still believe that, you know, trust deficit because between the demands of both the communities remains so wide, I do not see any kind of, trust building up. Trust will build up in terms of addressing, the violence. But I do not see the demands of the Meiteis or the demands of the Kukis are met, because if they are addressed, it will lead to any kind of violence, all kinds of violence. It's like you are engaged in talks with the NSA and IM, which wants Greater Nagaland, and everybody knows if you start talking about Greater Nagaland in Nagaland, in Manipur, you will have more, conflicts. So this issue will be, this contentious issues will be kept aside, and what the government will try to do is just basically build up this situation. So in a way, the Home Minister is not offering anything new except possibly explaining what will happen in the next few months if they come to power. Because at the end of the day,
I have a question for you. I have a question for you. You know, the talks with the separate groups have happened separately, but for the first time, you know, even the MLAs of different ethnic communities, they refuse to sit with each other. I find this very, very, maybe it has happened in 60s, 70s and 80s. You know, it's history. But in my 24 years of journalism, this one context is very, very stark for me, where people don't sit with each other in the same room. Even in Delhi, a big foundation called People, but first the Kukis were called and then the Meiteis. You couldn't put them in the same room. I was surprised. I don't want to name the foundation nor the people involved, but it was a genuine effort they tried to do, but it was difficult.
So that's why I'm saying, you know, the demand for scheduled tribe status frightens all tribals in Manipur. So that is not something they are going to give in. And the moment the Meiteis are given scheduled tribe status, you could see the most violent reactions from all the tribals. Now, if the tribals in Manipur want 6 scheduled status, or they have given up 6 schedules, they want, you know, union territory or central administrative territory, whatever it might be, it means that it's a challenge to the territorial integrity of Manipur, and you will once again see violence. And that is why I'm saying, you know, I mean, the demands from both sides are so wide, there is no way they will meet. But I would still say, I think the talks which the Home Minister has been talking about, they have been going on for a long time. You know, from the beginning, the director of the IBA has been talking to the Kukis and officials from the Home Ministry and the political leadership. We are talking to the, you know, Meitei leadership. So these talks have been continuing for a long time.
Mr.
Maybe
Chakma,
now they feel that they can be brought together.
Okay. I'm also joined by Rami Niranjan Desai, noted author on Northeast and expert. Rami, thank you for joining me on my show. This conversation is based on the interview given by Amit Shah to the one of the agencies, and he says, one, that it's not terrorism, you know, this is an ethnic conflict, but it's going to take time, and after Lok Sabha election, the entire process would be expedited. So my whole conversation was framed on the context that to expedite something, I think the government had time of more than a year. They could have done it last year itself. Why has it taken so much of time?
Karthikeya, good evening. First of all, I think, you know, we've been discussing this conflict for the last 1 year, and we also realize, and we have to give respect to the fact that, you know, the conflict was at its peak and there were tempers flaring from both sides. It was very complex and it was very difficult to figure out who really the actors in this conflict were. So at that time, in that position, to be able to take concerted actions possibly was not, either advisable nor was it possible for the government to do, because who are you going to take the actions against? And if it is a question of trying to bring the violence down, that we've already seen, the rate of incidents have come down, you know, so therefore the forces did their jobs. However, if you also remember, for the last 1 year, we've been talking about the role of civil society. Now, initially, I would always say, you know, the civil society needs to really come out and engage, you know, and not leave everything to the government, not leave everything
I think the correct word is dial down. I think they should dial down.
they should dial down, but also, Kartikeya, civil society has a role, especially in communities like this. And I remember right at the outset of the conflict, when I would say this, there were a lot of people, on your show itself, who would have an opposing point of view, who would say, oh, well, it's not the civil society's job to do so. Of course it is, it is your children that are going to get affected. It is your communities that are going to get affected. And why should civil society not have a stakeholding? So I think what the Home Minister said is absolutely correct, that now that the violence to a certain extent has come down, and of course we are very aware that it is not entirely resolved, but it has come down. There is some semblance of abnormal normality, so as to say, that there will be a more focused effort towards resolving these issues within both the communities. But how is the government supposed to resolve trust issues? How is the government supposed to resolve anger issues? And of course, like I heard a little bit of what my previous panelists said, that there are a huge amount of demands that both the sides have. And I have said this from day one, and I'm not saying anything new, that these demands need to be toned down, because nobody is going to come on a negotiating table and get 100% of what they want. This is not the time to talk about demands. This is the time to talk about who are these actors who are still interested in keeping this conflict going, who are these actors that have vested interests in sort of portraying that there is this simmering sense of secessionism that is also coming in, which are all very dangerous ideas that are being sown into common civil society. Who are the actors who now, at the front of, while the elections were coming on, were even dividing society on the basis of political lines? Is this what we need? And I think those are the people that need to be called out. And I think what needs to be done now is for us to wait until the elections are over to create civil society engagement on a community to community level, to wait and see what the government does. And of course, if people are not happy, there is stock taking that can happen. But constantly saying that, have you ever seen, Kartikeya, the social media? There is constant blame game going on. There is constant, so and so said this, so and so said that. Both communities are at each other's necks. And this obviously makes them heroes on social media, and that's actually not helping the situation. What is the impact of it on ground? Nothing, except the fault lines become graver, they become deeper. And I don't think that's what we need at this point. So, Kartik, I think all I have to say is that, people need to take the onus on themselves as well. Cut down this blame game, blaming each other, blaming the defense forces, blaming the government, and see what they really can do for their own society.
Then let me ask this question to Mr. Chakma sir. When we talk about conflict resolutions, what is the fundamental thing, or the two most fundamental things required for any conflict resolution?
Well, the first fundamental thing is to identify the actors. At the end of the day, I think apart from the civil society, there are other actors who are more powerful than the civil society actors. So that you have to identify. And in this particular case, I think, unfortunately, the Chief Minister himself is one of the stakeholders, not as a neutral person, but as somebody who is part of this conflict. So that's one aspect. The second step is also, I think, necessary, is to create, the atmosphere where the parties can come around and sit together. And I think we still have not reached this stage where, the Meitei leadership as well as the Kuki leadership could come around and sit in one table. So that will require some amount of backdoor maneuvering, and that's going to be very, very difficult, because it is contingent upon a number of other factors which they have to take into account. So till you can facilitate that process, to bring them to the table, you are not going to be successful. I think the first challenge is to address the conditions which will make them, comfortable to come and sit across the table. And at this stage, I don't think it exists. And there is something which can be gradually worked upon and can be created. It's not something which cannot be created. It can be created. It's not if the Israelis and the Hamas could speak through somebody else, obviously the Kukis and the Meiteis can talk. So it only depends on whom you are engaging and what kind of brief you are providing. often the brief given to the people who are supposed to be facilitate these people, this kind of processes, they are not willing to venture beyond the lines which they have been drawn. I think somebody who is engaging in this kind of a process needs to have some kind of an open-ended briefing.
Okay, Rami, before I end the show, your observation on what sort of conversation is required. What do you think is fundamental for any peace process to be expedited? I know you were part and parcel last year when hosts of people came to Delhi and they vented themselves and spoke to each other. A year has passed. What do you think in conflict resolution in this context is the most important thing to be done?
I think we have to be very clear about, yes, the actors need to be, identified, but having said that, the analogy of Hamas and Israel is not the same as the situation in Manipur, because we're not talking to a terrorist organization here. These are both communities who are stakeholders in the state and therefore have equal rights to engage in dialogue and have equal stakeholding in the future of Manipur. So I really hope that better sense prevails. Of course, dialogue can be, on different levels. It can be in an intra-governmental level as well. It can be amongst communities as well. It can be amongst the, women of both these societies who have always, been known to be at the forefront of any change in the state. I'm just giving an example, but I think these are all very important aspects, and I think we need to really calm down all the politicking that is going on. As the rate of incidence of violence comes out, the politicking goes up, so this is never ending. And, we must also remember, of course, elections will tell us, how much faith there is, this is a democratic process, how much faith there is in the government, But having said that, we must also understand that conflicts have happened before also. May I also remind you that, when this dispensation took over, for I think it was for over a year that there were tribal bodies that were not being buried because of a perceived law that had come out that was seen as anti-tribal, and that was from the Congress. So these problems have happened time and again. So trust building, faith building, if you want to live together, will have to happen, and will have to happen with people who don't really see a benefit at the end of the tunnel. The only benefit that they see is a peaceful Manipur.
Thank you so much, Rami, for joining me at the last minute, and thank you so much, Mr. Chakma. Brijesh, you don't go away. But I think a very important statement made by Amit Shah when he says that in the issue of ethnic violence, it's not an issue of terrorism, and it has to be resolved in a way which is different from other conflicts. This particularization of Manipur conflict by Amit Shah is a very welcome statement. It's a very welcome statement. It sends a very positive signal to Manipur. But that was on point number 2. And on point number 3 is Prajwal Rana apologizes to parents in fresh video, says he was depressed, will appear before SIT. Rape accused, suspended Janata Dal Secular MP Prajwal Rana, who is accused of sexually harassing several women, said he would appear before the special investigation team on May 31st. The 33-year-old Hassan MP is facing charges of